Imagine lying awake in a barracks, the humid night pressing down like a living weight, and hearing whispers that aren't there. Every corner hides a secret, every shadow a presence that watches, waits, and remembers. What if the horrors of war weren't only on the battlefield? What if the darkest threats were invisible, patient, and feeding on silence? Michael thought he understood danger, but what follows him from base to base, across highways and forests, is more than human. It doesn't forget. It doesn't forgive. And it's closer than he thinks. In this story, every step you take could bring you face to face with the unseeable. Chapter 1. Teach Whispering Floors. Rewritten, error-free. I checked into the barracks at Hadnut Point, Camp Lejeune, just before sunset. 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines. The building was exactly what I expected. 2-story brick, aging but solid. A structure that had survived hurricanes, decades of boots, and more stories than anyone cared to remember. Inside, the squad bay stretched long and narrow, racks aligned with parade ground precision. Green wool blankets were pulled tight. The smell of floor wax mixed with gun oil and damp coastal air. Outside the open windows, pine trees swayed slowly, and somewhere far off, artillery thumped against the horizon. This place never felt quiet. It only paused. After dumping my sea bags and grabbing a rack, exhaustion hit hard. I didn't even bother unlacing my boots fully before lying down. Lights went out quickly. Marines sleep fast when they're trained to. Sometime after midnight, I woke up. At first, I couldn't tell why. Then my feet touched the concrete floor. Cold. Too cold. And beneath it, sound. Not footsteps. Not wind. Voices. Low. Muffled. Overlapping. They weren't coming from the hallway or the next room. They were rising from below the floor itself. I sat still, heart hammering, listening. The voices weren't loud enough to understand, but they were unmistakably human. I pressed my palm flat against the concrete. A faint vibration pulsed upward, subtle but real. My first thought was pipes. Old barracks had bad plumbing, but pipes don't rise and fall like conversations. I stood slowly and crossed the bay, careful not to wake anyone. Kneeling near the center, I pressed my ear to the floor. The sound sharpened. Can't breathe. The water. Tell them. My stomach tightened. I backed away and went to the head, splashing cold water on my face under harsh fluorescent lights. The reflection staring back at me looked pale, eyes too alert for the hour. Just fatigue, I told myself. Field ops. No sleep. Mind playing tricks. When I returned to my rack, the whispers faded, but they didn't disappear. Every time I drifted toward sleep, they crept back, murmuring like something trying not to be heard. Morning came fast. During chow, I leaned toward Corporal Ramirez, my fire team leader, keeping my voice low. Hey, Corporal. You ever hear anything weird at night? Like voices in the barracks? His fork froze midair. He looked at me for a long second, then glanced around the table. You didn't hear anything, he said quietly. But, drop it. His tone wasn't angry. It was warning. PFC Jenkins leaned closer. Old tunnels, man. WWII stuff. Sound echoes down there. Just let it go. Echoes don't beg for help. That night, the voices came back louder. My rackmate, Lance Corporal Hayes, sat up at the exact same moment I did. You hear that too? He whispered. We both slid to the floor, ears pressed to concrete. The voices were clearer now. Desperate. It burns. They knew. Help us. Hayes swallowed hard. That ain't pipes. Over the next few days, the whispers followed a pattern. Stronger after rain. Quieter during the day. Constant during fire watch. When I mentioned it again, Ramirez pulled me aside. Command knows, he said. They call it environmental noise. You report it, you end up on medical, career stalled. Ignore it. But one night, alone folding laundry on fire watch, the voices surged, angry, urgent. They let us drink it. Tell someone. I dropped the shirts and backed away. Whatever was under those floors wasn't noise. It was memory. And it wanted to be heard. Chapter 2. Shadows INTHE Basement. I was Sergeant Elias Thompson, 1st Battalion, 6th Marines, recently back at Camp Lejeune after deployment. I had been stationed here before and knew the difference between real problems and the usual barracks nonsense. Ghost stories usually fell into the second category, boots scaring boots, boredom breeding nonsense. So when I heard the rumors about whispers under the Hadnut Point barracks, I ignored them. Until I heard them myself. The night it started, I was in the basement pulling ammo cans for the next day's range. The stairwell echoed as I descended, metal steps ringing hollow with every footfall. The basement was nothing special: concrete walls, exposed pipes, stacked lockers, and rows of dusty gear that hadn't been touched in years. Bare bulbs buzzed overhead, casting long, uneven shadows. I was counting ammo cans when the sound reached me. At first, it was so faint I thought it was my imagination, a low murmur beneath the hum of electricity. I paused, holding my breath. The murmur continued, rising and falling like overlapping conversations, not coming from upstairs, coming from the far wall. I turned slowly, flashlight beam cutting across the concrete until it landed on an old metal grate bolted into the wall. The paint was flaking, rust bleeding through like dried blood. Behind it was darkness, deep, absolute. The voices sharpened. Trapped. Down here. The poison. My pulse kicked hard against my ribs. I stepped closer, pressing my ear near the grate. The metal vibrated faintly, like sound traveling through something solid. Pipes, I told myself. Ventilation. Old buildings do this. But pipes don't whisper. I keyed my radio. Duty. This is Sergeant Thompson in the basement. Hearing voices from a wall vent. Requesting someone to verify. The reply came too fast. Negative, Sergeant. Probably maintenance noise. Log it and return to quarters. That was it. No curiosity. No follow-up. I stood there another moment, staring at the grate. Then the voices stopped, cutting off so abruptly the silence rang louder than the sound had. That night, the whispers followed me upstairs. They came through the floor beneath my rack, faint but persistent, threading into my dreams. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, telling myself it was exhaustion, jet lag, stress, anything but what it felt like. The next morning, I pulled my platoon sergeant aside behind the smoke pit. Gunnery Sergeant Powell had 20 years in and eyes that missed nothing. "Gunny," I said quietly, "you ever hear about voices coming from under the barracks?" He took a long drag from his cigarette, then exhaled slowly. "Drop it, Thompson." I heard them. His eyes flicked to mine. Just for a second. Something unreadable crossed his face. "You didn't," he said, "and you don't want to. That should have been the end of it." It wasn't. 2 nights later, the whispers returned stronger, angrier. I was halfway asleep when they pulled me back awake, voices overlapping like a crowd pressed against glass. They left us. Orders. Don't seal it. I sat up, sweat cooling on my back. Enough. That weekend, when most of the platoon was on liberty, I grabbed 2 Marines I trusted, Corporal Lee and Lance Corporal Vargas. I didn't tell them much, just that I needed help checking something off books. We waited until after midnight. The basement felt different at night. Colder. Heavier. When we reached the grate, the voices started immediately, like they knew we were there. "You came." Lee swallowed. "Sarge. You hearing that?" "Yeah," I said. "I am." The bolts came loose with a screech that echoed through the basement. We pulled the grate free, revealing a narrow tunnel just wide enough to crawl through. Cold air spilled out, carrying a chemical tang that burned faintly in the nose. "This ain't ventilation," Vargas muttered. We crawled in single file. The tunnel sloped downward, walls damp and rough. After about 40 yards, it opened into a small reinforced chamber. Faded stenciling on the wall read, "Shelter 7, capacity 20 to 1958. Rusting bunk frames lined the walls. The floor was scattered with debris, old gear, brass casings, a cracked canteen. And then the voices surrounded us. Not whispers anymore. "You came back. They promised. They left us here." Lee stumbled back. "There's nobody here." I saw it then. Something glinting near one of the bunks. I picked it up slowly. A dog tag. The chain crumbled in my fingers, but the name was still clear. Harlan J. USMC 1956. The temperature dropped fast. My breath fogged. The shadows along the walls thickened, stretching where they shouldn't. "Don't leave us again," the voices said together. That was enough. We scrambled back through the tunnel, scraping elbows and knees, not stopping until we were back in the basement. I jammed the grate into place as best I could. None of us spoke for a long time. Finally, Lee broke the silence. "Sarge, that wasn't sound. That was people." I nodded. "Yeah." That night, The whispers returned, clearer than ever. They didn't repeat the same phrases anymore. They repeated a name, Harlan, over and over. And deep down, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever was buried under Camp Lejeune wasn't finished telling its story. Chapter 3. The files they buried. The whispers didn't stop after that night. They changed. Instead of drifting through the floors like distant echoes, they followed me into the chow hall, across the parade deck, even into the roar of helicopters lifting off near the flight line. I'd catch fragments when no one else was talking. Records. They erased us. Tell them. Sleep became optional. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the bunker, Shelter 7, its rusted bunks waiting like graves that never quite filled. And the name kept circling in my head. Harlan. On the fourth day without real rest, I did something I'd sworn I wouldn't do. I went digging. Camp Lejeune had archives, old ones, stored beneath the administrative wing. Files nobody cared about unless a lawyer or historian came knocking. I used my rank, my clearance, and the fact that nobody expects a Marine to ask too many questions. The records room smelled like dust and paper rot. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead as I pulled binders from shelves marked 1950 to 1965. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, only that I'd know it when I saw it. Then I found it. A thin folder labeled, Training Incident, Restricted. Inside were faded reports, typed on yellowing paper. Date, June 1958. Location, Hadnett Point. Unit, Experimental Logistics Detachment. The words blurred as I read faster. Water contamination detected during field testing. Personnel ordered to remain in shelter pending decontamination. Evacuation delayed by command decision. My hands tightened. Delayed. Another page listed names. 20 Marines. I scanned the list until my breath caught. Harlan, James R. Corporal. At the bottom, stamped in red ink. Case closed. No survivors. Classified, no survivors. But no bodies listed. No burial records. No notification logs. They hadn't died. They'd been sealed in. I heard a sound behind me and spun around, heart hammering. Gunnery Sergeant Powell stood in the doorway. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. I didn't bother playing dumb. "You knew." His jaw tightened. I knew enough. "They locked 20 Marines underground and walked away," I snapped. "That's not enough. That's murder." Powell stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Orders came from higher than base command. Chemical exposure. Liability. Cold War panic. They decided silence was cheaper than cleanup. "And the voices?" I demanded. "You hear them too?" He hesitated. That was all the answer I needed. "They don't let go," he said finally. "Not when they're forgotten." That night, Lee and Vargas came to my room without knocking. "It's spreading," Vargas said. "Guys on third deck hearing knocks under their racks. Someone swears he heard breathing coming from the shower drains." Lee looked pale. "Command's moving people. Quietly. Like they're trying to outrun something." As if on cue, the lights flickered. The temperature dropped. Then the whisper rose. Not from one place, but everywhere. "They know now. Don't let them seal it again." My wall locker rattled. The metal door banged open, slamming against the frame. Inside, my gear shifted, unseen hands dragging fingers across Kevlar and steel. "Shelter 7, I said aloud. They want it opened. We returned to the basement just after midnight. This time better prepared, bolt cutters, radios, flashlights, and a growing sense that preparation wouldn't matter. The grate was already off. Cold air poured from the tunnel like breath from a lung. As we crawled inside, the walls seemed closer, tighter, as if the tunnel was shrinking around us. The chamber waited at the end, darker than before. The bunks were no longer empty. Shapes sat on them, vague at first, then clearer. Translucent figures and old utilities. Faces pale and hollow. Eyes burning with something between rage and relief. "You read the file," one of them said. His voice wasn't sound. It was pressure, inside my skull. "Harlan," I whispered. He nodded. "You heard us. That made you responsible. What do you want?" Lee asked, voice shaking. "To be acknowledged," Harlan said. "To be known. To stop the silence." The walls trembled. Rust flaked from the ceiling. For a moment, I thought the bunker would collapse and bury us all. Then the lights in the chamber flared white. A figure stood at the far end. Not a Marine. Something taller. Wrong. Its outline shimmered like heat off asphalt. They were not meant to remember. it hissed. The spirits recoiled. What the hell is that? Vargas shouted. Harlan's expression hardened. That's what fed on us when they left. It learned our voices. Used them. The thing moved closer, shadows stretching toward us like claws. Radios screeched with static. My ears rang. Sergeant, Harlan said, locking eyes with me. You open the door. Now you have to choose. The entity surged forward. I grabbed the dog tag from my pocket, the one I'd kept since the first night, and slammed it onto the concrete floor. I won't let them be erased again, I said. The chamber shook violently. The whispers rose into a roar, and something deep beneath Camp Lejeune finally screamed back. Chapter 4. The thing that wept. The scream didn't sound like rage. It sounded like grief. The chamber shook as if something massive had shifted deep beneath the earth. Concrete cracked along the walls, dust raining down into our eyes and mouths. The tall shadow recoiled from the dog tag like it had been struck, its form warping and stretching, edges blurring. You named them, it hissed. You broke the quiet. Harlan stepped forward, his form solidifying, the faded utilities on his body becoming clearer. Rank insignia visible now, proud even in death. They were Marines, he said. You fed on our silence. That ends now. The thing shrank back toward the far wall, but it didn't disappear. Instead, it changed. Its shape sagged, folding inward, until it resembled something almost human. Head bowed, shoulders trembling. A sound escaped it, low and wet. Crying. Lee stared, frozen. That thing, it's crying. No, Harlan said grimly. It's remembering. The bunker lights flickered violently. Images flooded the walls like reflections on water, memories bleeding through time. We saw young Marines laughing, passing canteens during a training break. We saw warning lights flashing red. We saw officers arguing, voices raised, papers stamped and restamped. Then steel doors closing, lock sealing. And finally, waiting. Days turning into weeks. Thirst. Hallucinations. The whispers weren't ghosts repeating words. They were memories looping, desperate to be heard. The entity screamed again, louder now, its form unraveling into tendrils of shadow that lashed across the room. One struck Vargas, throwing him against the wall. He collapsed, gasping. Get him up, I shouted. Harlan raised his hand. The spirits moved with him, forming a line between us and the shadow. It can't exist without neglect, he said. It grows where truth is buried. The realization hit me hard. This thing isn't the cause, I said. It's the result. The shadow shrieked, as if offended by the truth. Radios crackled to life all at once. All units evacuate. Structural instability. Seal the lower levels. Powell's voice cut through the chaos. Thompson, command's issuing a hard seal order. They're bringing in concrete trucks. My blood went cold. They're doing it again, Lee whispered. Harlan's eyes locked onto mine. They will bury us twice. No, I said. Not this time. I keyed my radio. Gunny, listen to me. You seal that bunker. You won't just bury ghosts. You'll trap something worse. Silence. Then Powell spoke, low and steady. What do you need? I looked around the collapsing chamber. The spirits were fading, their forms flickering as the shadow lunged again, desperate now. Witnesses, I said. Records. Light. You expose it. Powell exhaled sharply. Understood. The bunker groaned, a deep structural moan that vibrated through our bones. Cracks spider-webbed across the ceiling. Harlan stepped closer to me. We can hold it briefly, but it will take us with it. What happens to you? I asked. He smiled faintly. We finally rest. The shadow surged one last time, expanding, trying to consume everything in the room. N-O-W, Harlan shouted. The spirits screamed, not in pain, but in unity. Light erupted from them, not blinding, but heavy, like truth finally spoken aloud. The shadow convulsed, its form unraveling, collapsing inward as if crushed by memory. The chamber imploded. Lee dragged Vargas as I ran, barely making it through the tunnel before the floor behind us collapsed with a thunderous roar. We hit the basement hard, lungs burning, ears ringing. Behind us, the tunnel sealed itself, concrete and earth collapsing into a solid wall. Silence followed. Real silence. No whispers. No pressure. Just the hum of electricity and distant footsteps as MPs flooded the area. By morning, the official report was ready. Structural failure due to age and corrosion. Unauthorized access by personnel. No evidence of sublevels beyond maintenance tunnels. Powell met me by the motor pool as the sun rose. They're burying it in paperwork, he said. But I leaked copies. Names. Dates. Everything. Will it matter? I asked. He nodded toward a group of officers arguing near a convoy of news vans at the gate. It already does. That night, Camp Lejeune felt different. Lighter, but not empty. I stood alone near Hadnot Point, the air thick with salt and memory. For the first time since this began, I slept without voices. Before dawn, I felt it, a presence, gentle this time. A whisper brushed my ear. "Thank you, Sergeant." I turned. No one stood there. But the dog tag in my pocket was warm. And deep beneath the base, whatever had fed on silence was gone. Starved by truth. The ground would remember. So would I. Chapter 5. What still walks? Truth didn't arrive at Camp Lejeune like a sunrise. It came like fog, slow, heavy, and unsettling. The leaked files hit internal channels first. Names long erased resurfaced in official emails. In quiet meetings behind closed doors. Officers who'd never heard of Shelter 7 suddenly knew it by heart. Legal teams arrived. So did investigators who asked careful questions and wrote careful notes. But the base never made a public statement. Not really. They called it a historical irregularity. A Cold War procedural failure. Words chosen to soften the weight of 20 abandoned lives. Powell warned me early. They'll acknowledge just enough to make it go away. He was right. The whispers were gone. But the silence that replaced them felt watched. Lee transferred out within a week. Vargas stayed. But he wasn't the same. He jumped at loud noises, avoided the basement, and stopped sleeping in the barracks altogether. As for me, command placed me on temporary administrative duty, close enough to keep an eye on, far enough to control. I started noticing the details others ignored. Maintenance reports altered after submission. Security camera footage corrupted at the same timestamps every night. 0307 hours. Old structures marked unsafe, without inspections ever happening. Someone wasn't just covering up the past. They were protecting something that still existed. The first sign came from the water. A corporal from Alpha Company collapsed during PT, coughing violently. Medics said it was dehydration, but I overheard a corpsman mutter about chemical taste and burning lungs. Hadn't point again. That night, I dreamed of the bunker. Not collapsed this time, but whole. Empty bunks, wet concrete, and footprints leading away from them. In the dream, something walked out. I woke up with the dog tag burning against my chest. I went back to the archives. Most of the Shelter 7 files were gone now, replaced by summaries and redactions. But one thing remained, an addendum attached to the original incident report. Overlooked because it wasn't classified. Observation. Post-seal anomalies detected. Recommendation. Long-term monitoring. Monitoring. Not cleanup. Not removal. Containment. I found Powell at the range, watching recruits run drills with an expression I hadn't seen before, tired, haunted. "They didn't destroy it, did they?" I asked. "No," he said. "They starved it." I felt my stomach drop. "That thing fed on neglect," I said. "On buried truth." Powell nodded. "And now it feeds on fragments. On what didn't make it into the files." The next night, the power flickered across base housing. Just once. At 0307. I grabbed my boots and went outside. The air felt wrong, too still, like the world holding its breath. Near the edge of Hadnot Point, I saw movement. A figure stood near the old fence line. Tall. Wrong. It didn't cast a shadow. I approached slowly, heart pounding, every instinct screaming to turn back. "Harlan?" I whispered. The figure turned. Its face wasn't his, but it wore his shape. Its mouth opened, and the voice that came out was layered. Harlan's calm tone wrapped around something deeper, hungry. "You told the truth," it said, "but not all of it." Cold fear slid down my spine. "What are you?" I asked. It tilted its head. "I am what remains when acknowledgement stops short." The figure gestured toward the base. Lights flickered in distant buildings. "You fed me again." It continued, with half confessions, with sealed memos, with silence wearing a uniform. I clenched the dog tag in my fist. "You're not welcome here." It smiled, too wide. "This place was built on forgetting. I belong." Behind it, the ground rippled faintly, like something moving just beneath the surface. I understood then. We hadn't ended it. We changed its shape. The entity stepped back, fading into the darkness, its voice lingering in the air. "Every base is one," it whispered. "Every institution." The next morning, command issued transfer orders. For me. Immediate. No explanation. Powell shook my hand hard. "You did what you could." As I packed, I found something new on my rack. A second dog tag. Not Harlan's. Mine. Stamped clean and bright. I left Camp Lejeune under gray skies, the base shrinking in my rearview mirror. The whispers didn't follow, but neither did the peace. Somewhere beneath the concrete and paperwork, something still listened, patient, adapting, feeding on what people choose not to say. Truth had power, but so did omission. And as long as places like Camp Lejeune stood, built on buried stories and sealed doors, there would always be something waiting underneath. Not dead, just contained. For now. Chapter 6. Outside the wire. Leaving Camp Lejeune didn't bring freedom. It brought questions. Questions with teeth. I drove north, headlights cutting through early January fog. The road stretched endlessly, like the kind of road where memories follow you at the edge of the windshield. Each mile marker, reminded me of Hadnut Point, of cold concrete, of something that still walked when the world pretended to sleep. At a roadside diner in Jacksonville, I tried to act normal, but I couldn't eat, couldn't stop scanning shadows in the corners of the room. The waitress noticed. She asked if I was okay. I forced a smile. Just tired, I said. But even the words sounded fragile. Powell's warning echoed in my head. It feeds on what you ignore. Don't ignore anything. That night, I stayed at a cheap motel near the highway. Windows closed, TV playing static, the hum of the fridge filling the silence. Sleep came, but it brought fragments. Harlan's face, the shape near the fence, the words. Every base is one, every institution. I woke to a tap on the door. I froze. No one called my number. No one knew I was here. I reached for the lamp, hard hammering, and peeked through the peephole. Empty hall. Only a shadow, faint, lingering. I opened the door. Nothing. But on the carpet, a folded note. You can't run. No signature. No footprints. I packed fast and left, driving north toward a town I had never heard of, but had a file in the leaked shelter 7 documents, Fort Bragg. Another base. Another chance that history might be repeating itself. By afternoon, I reached the outskirts. The town felt wrong. Empty streets, lights flickering as if on borrowed power. I stopped at a gas station. Inside, the clerk was older than time itself. Or maybe I just noticed differently now, eyes too knowing. Looking for someone? He asked. I stiffened. No, just passing through. He nodded slowly. Some things don't stay buried. They just move. Before I could respond, the door behind me slammed. Outside, a cold wind rattled the pumps. I stepped out, scanning the empty street. A man, a figure, stood across the lot. Too tall, too thin, as if stretched by unseen hands. And yes, it had the same wrongness. The absence of shadow, the faint ripple of air around it, as if reality bent for its presence. It spoke, low and precise. Still human. Still fragile. Still thinking you are safe. I swallowed hard. I don't know what you want. Not want. It corrected. Remember. Repeat. Feed. The lights in the town flickered, went out. Every electronic hum ceased, and for a moment, silence became visible. I could feel the weight of attention. Not just mine. Mine plus all the hidden, watching things from the bunkers, files, abandoned hallways. I ran. Through back alleys. Over broken fences. Past forgotten warehouses. It followed. Always there. Just beyond sight. But I could feel the pull. I found a phone booth, antique, barely working. I called Powell. Where are you? He asked, voice sharp with panic. Fort Bragg. I gasped. Something it's here. Get off base property. Head south. Highway. Now. I looked over my shoulder. The figure moved faster than physics allowed, cutting the distance without a sound. I slammed the receiver down, ran to my car, and drove. On the highway, I couldn't shake the feeling of being measured. Not followed, exactly, but calibrated. My own thoughts whispered lies. What if leaving only spread it? What if running was exactly what I wanted? Hours passed. Fog thickened. I barely remembered to breathe. And then, my phone buzzed. A message. You can't hide. You never really left. The sender. Unknown. I knew it was right. Somewhere, across base and town, across documents and digital footprints, something persisted. Something patient. Something that could wait out the dead, the living, the indifferent. By the time I reached a highway rest stop, dawn was breaking. Weak, gray light over miles of asphalt. I parked, exhausted, but alert. And then I saw it. Not the figure, not yet, but the ripple of air ahead, like a heat wave on concrete. A subtle distortion of reality that told me it had been here. Watching, waiting, adapting. I thought about Powell, about Harlan, about the dog tags, about silence, secrecy, and omission. And I realized containment wasn't enough. We had only delayed it, shaped it, fed it indirectly. It had followed me outside the wire, outside the walls, outside everything I thought could protect me. And now, there was nowhere safe left. As I sat in the rest stop parking lot, trying to catch my breath, a thought slithered in. Maybe all bases have won, and maybe all humans do too, in their own ways, hidden shadows, unspoken truths, waiting to grow into something uncontainable. The sun rose, weak and watery. I started the car. Destination unknown. One thing certain. I could not stop. Not yet. Not ever. If I hoped to understand what still walked, what still listened, and what I had unwillingly set loose. Because some things, once remembered, cannot be forgotten. And some things never die. They only wait for the next careless soul to look the other way. Chapter 7. The shadow closes in. The sun was just a pale smear over the horizon, and I felt hollowed by the night's chase. Highway miles stretched endlessly, asphalt like black ice under gray light. My hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white. Every sound, wind over the tires, distant truck engines, felt amplified. Every shadow seemed alive. I thought I had escaped. I thought moving outside the wire meant freedom. I was wrong. Powell's warning replayed in my head. You can't ignore it. You can't negotiate. You can only survive and observe. But observation didn't feel like survival anymore. The figure was inside my thoughts, inside my panic, inside the car with me, even when I was alone. And then it happened. The headlights flickered, then died. Engines stuttered. Everything electronic refused to work. I was stranded. Before I could react, a presence settled behind me. Not physical, not in the usual sense, but heavy enough that I could feel it pressing through the seat. Cold. Expectant. Do you remember? It said. Voice like gravel, whispering through bone. I swallowed. Heart hammering. Remember what? Everything. It said. Every base. Every man. Every lie left unspoken. I knew in that instant that this wasn't just following me. It was testing me, measuring my reaction. Feeding on fear, yes, but also attention. The longer I stared, the more it solidified, the more it existed. I stepped out of the car, hands raised instinctively. Fog clung to my body, chilling me to the bone. The air bent around the shape before me, warping like heat over sand. And then I saw it clearly. Not a man, not human. A silhouette stitched from absence, moving like water, yet cutting shadows sharper than any solid object. You know why I am here? It said. I shook my head, but my throat was tight. I don't. I just know you're real. Real? It echoed, a hollow mockery. I am more than real. I am consequence. I am what you leave behind when you pretend not to see. You walked through corridors with me in the corner of your eye. You slept in bunks with me whispering. You thought it was coincidence, fatigue. Ghosts. But ghosts obey rules. I do not. Fear twisted in my chest, sharp and physical. I wanted to run, but my feet felt cemented. Instinct screamed, but reason whispered. Study it. Observe. Survive. It stepped closer, or at least, I felt it closer. Time seemed to stretch. Minutes condensed into seconds. Seconds into infinity. And then it spoke my name. Michael. Do you remember Harlan? I did. The corporal whose body had been found near Hadnot Point. Missing eyes. Expression frozen in terror. Yes, I said, voice trembling. I am what he became, the figure said. And I am patient. I grow in corners, in silence, in forgotten protocols. I am your witness now. Your history. Your judgment. A chill rose along my spine. The world seemed thinner around the edges, as if walls, asphalt, and air were nothing but illusions. Every instinct told me to flee, but a deeper, darker curiosity kept me rooted. I had to see it, understand it. Why me? I asked. Why follow me? Because you remembered. It said simply. Because you acknowledge the cracks. Because you have not lied to yourself. That makes you interesting. And then it moved, too fast, too precise. One moment, across the highway. The next beside me. The fog swirled around it, obscuring, revealing, twisting reality. My stomach lurched, nausea sharp and bitter. I stumbled back, falling onto the cold asphalt. And for a moment, I saw not just the figure, but visions behind it. Flashes of other bases, other soldiers, other moments where it had been feeding silently, invisibly. It was everywhere, and nowhere. The pattern was terrifying, systematic, patient, relentless. You see now, it said, what I do, what I am, and what you cannot unsee. I forced myself to stand, shaking, lungs gasping. Then what? What do you want from me? Understanding, it replied. Observation, respect, and most of all, honesty. Admit what you have ignored. Admit what others have covered. Admit the silence. I realized then the terrible truth. This wasn't just a creature or a ghost or a specter. It was an embodiment of all the secrets, all the unspoken violations, all the shadows that military life, and life in general, leaves behind. And now, it had chosen me as witness. I wanted to scream, to demand release, to pray, but words failed. The figure leaned closer. Presence overwhelming, cold permeating bone. I felt the edges of my mind fray. "Do you accept?" it asked. "Yes," I whispered. I will remember. I will see. I will not ignore." It paused. The world seemed to shift. The fog thinned. For the first time, I felt it hesitate. "Good," it said finally. "You may proceed, but beware. The others are patient, and the world is vast. Every base is one. Every man leaves one. And they never sleep." Then, as suddenly as it had come, it dissipated. Air snapped back, car engines sputtered to life, and the highway looked normal again. Sunlight catching on ice patches, distant trucks moving along lanes. Only my heart remembered. Only my shaking hands. Only my mind understood what had just been survived, not conquered. I got into the car, hands trembling on the wheel. Powell's words came back. "You can only survive and observe." Now, more than ever, I understood the weight of that. I drove. North, south, direction meaningless now. Every town, every base, every shadow on the edge of perception could hide it, or its kind. And I was alone. Except I was not. I carried it with me. And that knowledge was heavier than anything the night could throw. Because some shadows do not just follow. They teach. They judge. And they wait for the next careless human to glance away. And I had glanced.